The hive mentality, also known as groupthink, is when a person has a strong tendency to fall for group decision making. If someone has a hive mentality, they may feel invulnerable and morally correct when they're part of a certain group. They may also not be able to make decisions on their own. Perfect example. With thousands of species of, let's take bees for example, the honeybee has a great, has, I guess you would say, a tendency, or it could be a great example of the hive mind in action. Um, Not all bees behave this way. There's certain bees that spend their lives in a very solitary state, building cells to store honey, for example, while the honeybees, on the other hand, spend most of their life in that hive mentality, where the behaviors are part of that whole entire society, that whole entire community. And I've seen this a lot in school, in work, in parts of society. And at one point in time, I was very much caught in the hive mentality, the hive mind, whatever you want to call it. And it's okay to be a part of the hive mentality or the groupthink, but at certain points in time, it's not okay to always have that hive mentality when it comes to decision making and to what you totally align with. A good example would be when I was in college. Let's just say I was part of a club. If I was a member in a club and there was a vote on a certain decision, let's just say, let's raise, you know, let's raise X amount of money for this event, and these are the ways of how we're going to do it. You vote on those ideas, whichever ones I wouldn't say are unanimous, but majority vote are the ones that are going to pass, obviously. And with the hive mentality, a lot of people, what we call acquiesce, is when they actually go against, these individuals actually go against their own, you would call it like, their own personal beliefs or their own personal decision. And they actually succumb to the vote of the majority to actually fit in with that majority. And particularly, most times, that's not a bad thing because it makes the decision making much easier within the organization, within the group. Now, if you're the deciding vote, that could be a very different scenario where everyone might look at you and go, why would you vote against this? Now you have a bunch of eyes on you and a bunch of people thinking, he's against this idea. So, one of those examples being that, when I was a part of clubs, I used to see this frequently, happen all the time. Because as a part of groups in college, you're always voting on things. You're voting on new executive members. You're voting on plans, to host fundraisers. You're voting on events, for example, that the school might be able to recognize. And I also, I used to catch myself a lot acquiescing, to that hive mentality. Because a lot of times you don't want confrontation. You don't want to be the oddball out. And the organizations I was a part of, where whether it was Greek life, or business club, whatever type of club, where the vote was anonymous, I noticed every single time whenever it was anonymous, you would always get more of a skewed vote. Mainly because at that point in time, no one knows who's voting for who. And given that, you can basically vote however you want. You don't have to acquiesce towards the majority vote. And going off of that, I think it's pretty self explanatory. When you're anonymous, there's no backlash. Essentially, there's no, acquiescence. There's no, eyes on you or any majority thinking badly about you or questioning your decision. And obviously, you're going to get people who might suspect that you are one of the few who voted against it, if they know your personality well enough and your decision making, um, and you will certainly meet a lot of people who you can never really read completely because they have like that poker face, and you could just never completely read them. There's been a lot of people that I've met where I couldn't really understand what their decision making was, where their mentality, or their choice came from, until I realized, later on, I'm like, oh, you have to get to know these people personally, and then you start to figure out their decision making, what influences those decisions. But going back to the hive mind, when you leave like post college, of course, especially in an organization or a business or a place of work, usually if there's like a group vote or maybe some type of survey, especially if your name is on that survey, oftentimes the employees will vote for whatever outcome sounds best, or whatever outcome they feel or choice that they feel will certainly align with the goals of the company, and not choose something so negative. And especially when it's anonymous. Now, when it says it's anonymous, I still don't trust it. I still choose what I feel like is in my best interest, because they're asking for your honest opinion. Now, a lot of times you have to put your email in these. But I've come to realize that, we idolize a lot of people who stand out, yet whenever we try to step out of line, we get judged for it. You're like that worker bee, that honeybee who says, you know what, the whole entire hive goes over to this group of flowers each day. You know what, maybe I want to try this group of flowers over the fence. And all of a sudden, all the other bees look at you and go, this is not what we do here. Like, you need to stay in line. But yet, people in life idolize people who always step out of line and who are always like passionate towards something, that is not fixated on being, the norm in society. Like if you're that guy who runs 10 miles a day, and the majority of, society might only run maybe even half mile. A lot of people can't run a full mile, and that's okay. I mean, that's something you work up to. But if you're running 10 miles, people look at you and they think you're weird because you're doing something that's not deemed a norm by society. You're really stepping out of line. You're like the black sheep, and you're not living in that hive mindset. A perfect example, and I was actually talking to a buddy of mine on this about, I'd say, not too long ago. He asked me for investment advice. I told him, listen, you know the deal. Like, I'm going to recommend my best advice, but can't tell you what to do. He asked me what percentage of his paycheck he should be investing into the stock market. I said, okay, there's a lot of different questions that I like to ask people who are either new to investing, or if they have been investing for a period of time where they feel comfortable investing by themselves. And keep in mind, like, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm going to do my best to give you, the best, information that I have on mind, on my end to you. So my friend asked me, he goes, how much should I be investing into my paycheck? I said, well, I'll give you a majority. Like, majority of society will invest, they say somewhere between like 15-20% of your paycheck into the stock market. Given the compounding, market growth, dividend reinvestments, the deal. It's going to be X amount of money in 40 years. I said, but that is the hive mentality. Now, a lot of people, and I do not blame them one bit, cannot afford that 15 to 20% contribution. They're literally strapped. And I give those people mega benefit of the doubt, because let's just say you graduate from college, you're like maybe 6 figures in debt. I don't know, something like that. You buy a new car, you're in debt. You just got married, you're in debt. Okay, with all these credit bills that have to be paid off, one must think to themselves, if I'm going to be paying all these bills off, what is a priority? Now, if you can't afford that 15 to 20% distribution into your portfolio or the stock market per pay period because you quite simply have way too many bills stacked up, like all the other bills I mentioned prior, then you know what? You just make do with it. You can literally contribute 3%, 4%, and a lot of people think that does not sound like a lot. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. You make $1,000 every pay period. Let's just say it's $1,000 every 2 weeks. That's like what drops inside your checking account. You do the math, 1,000 times 26 pay periods, that's $26,000 a year that's dropping into your account. If you take that $26,000, right? Normally, I'm going to do some quick math. Give me one moment. If you contribute 15%, that's $3,900 invested per year with 26 pay periods. However, let's just say you're too strapped. Okay. You take that 26,000. You have bills to pay, food expenses, credit card bills, this and that. Let's say the max you can afford is not 15%, it's not 20%, it's 3%. 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but if we do the math, that's $780 per year that you're investing into your account. If you times that by 40, that's $31,200 over the course of 40 years. That's definitely not a lot of money. So at that point, I would say, you know what? Maybe it's not the issue of you just don't have enough to invest. Maybe it's your lifestyle. Maybe you moved into a house that's too big and it's costing you either too much rent or too much of a mortgage. And that's what we call part of the hive mentality. When you graduate college, society deems it normal that, oh, you have to buy a house. No, you don't. Maybe live at home for a while, sack up some, income, some nest egg, something like that. Oh, society says you have to get married post-college. No, you don't. A lot of people get married in their 30s. A lot of people will focus after college for about 5, 6, 7 years, grind hard, save away, build up that nest egg, build up their credit, and then when they go to invest, they're good to go. Personally, I don't plan on getting married for a while, but the point is, that's what society deems as normal, and you get judged differently. I get judged a lot for saying, like, oh, why are you, like, usually the single guy in the group? Well, because first of all, if you're committed to somebody, that's a huge responsibility. And societal norm, that hive mentality says, you should be dating someone because as humans, psychologically, we're very social animals, right? So let's just say I do have someone special in my life. We keep it very simple. We're very simple people. Doesn't mean that we have to go out every single night to go eat. We don't have to spend 24/7 with each other, which would honestly burn both of us out. But society deems that, hey, the hive mentality says that is something that, is just normal. So when we go off of that point, a lot of people I've known and I still know who are fabulous friends in my life, maybe even family too. They live solitary lives. They grind by themselves. They're like those bees that build the cells, in the hive, in the dark spaces where the honeybees go out there. They're living live. They're meeting new people. They're being social. I've learned to become a lot more social. I've had a lot of issues with that in the past because I honestly do not like a lot of people. If I don't like you, you'll know because I will let you know. But the few people that I get to know and I really come to respect a whole lot are people who are not respected by the hive mentality. And let's just say out of 100 people, it's 1, maybe 2 people. So it's a lot of hit or miss. It's a lot of trial and error meeting these people. But when I meet these people and I create rapport with them, create that relationship, it is like pretty solid. It's like a brick foundation. And those people are the type of, acquaintances or whatever you want to call them that don't live by the societal norm of what you should be doing in your 20s. Because first of all, I don't think there are any real rules in life other than work hard, respect those around you, respect friends and family, and support those that you care about. But when society pushes these pressures on you, saying that you should be doing this by a certain age. Like who deemed that necessary, right? Who came up with that in the very beginning? Because whoever came up with that in the very beginning, I feel like is actually trying to um, place that mindset into the younger crowd of people in their early 20s to actually set themselves up for failure later on in life. Like, go out and enjoy yourself whenever you can. But that's that's such a bad connotation of you're going out there to enjoy yourself, but you're blowing all your money, you're drinking, you're partying, you're eating out all the time, you're not investing. I invest like over 50% of my paycheck every pay period. And as someone who does extremely well, in my line of work, um, just the money flow is good. But more importantly, I've learned to not make money my number one. And in society, the hive mentality says, well, the hive mentality believes that the trifecta of, I wouldn't say a perfect person, but a quality person would simply be wealth, looks, and status. Now, wealth, I'm still building up my wealth. Um, Compared to a lot of, like, I guess you would say, compared to a majority of people I graduated college with, I have the absolute pleasure of not having a college debt, so I didn't have to really worry about that. I don't have any debt. Cars paid off, college is paid off. I don't have any credit card bills. I'm very good with paying off my bills in time. I always have a cash reserve, an emergency fund, not something too big because I'd rather have that money invested to where it's working for me. I had um, that old school mentality in the past where I'd have like, maybe 15, 20,000, as like an emergency fund. And then I realized like I don't need that much. I can literally invest this in the market and it would be making me at least 3 to 4% a year guaranteed if I kept it there. And that's in a down market. That's just with like dividends being reinvested. That's not actual growth, which, I could be seeing an additional 5 to 10% every year, which is conservative. And a lot of people that I talk to who invest look at me like I have three eyes when they hear that I invest over 50% of my paycheck, even though I do fairly well. I have no credit card bills. A lot of people think that it's good to leverage debt, which in certain cases, it can be a leverage. It can be beneficial. I have friends who have purchased real estate properties. Let's just say they put 5, 10% down, which is god awful. It's nothing really. It's not a whole lot. It's something though. And then they take equity out of that property and then they invest it into another property and they basically just rinse and repeat. I wouldn't recommend that because if let's just say the people you're renting out to, which is also funny because part of society says, hey, if you get into real estate, you could just rent out buildings to people, collect the rent, and help pay off the mortgage. But how long does it actually take for them to pay off that mortgage, right? Because if the mortgage is more than what you're charging for rent, then it's going to take you a lot longer to pay off that mortgage. Now, if you're working a full-time job and then you have people renting and you're both contributing and you're not skipping out, meaning, the rent that you're getting from your renters, you're not just using on anything else, but you're actually contributing towards the mortgage. And when you don't do that, it's called rent skimming. But let's just say you contribute your paycheck, you contribute your renter's profit, into that mortgage. Then it's like, boom, you're paying off that mortgage a lot faster. But I don't like the idea of leveraging money that I don't have because 2008 was a prime example. We saw a lot of people starting to default, like 2021, 2022, because of, having too many properties or, leveraging too much credit that they simply did not own. There's a very good reason why credit is starting to get a bad rap. Well, it's already had a bad rap, but debit is, what I like because it's like a true indication of, where you stand financially. When I talk to people who say like, oh, I'm worth X amount of money. Like I met one guy who's worth over 7 figures. I said, okay, how did you get there? I said, without telling me how to get there, like, how did you get there? And he goes, I put down on a property. I think he put down 15%. It's not terrible, like I said before, but it's not great. Put down 15%, pulled out equity from that property. Then I reinvested it into another property. So technically, I'm worth like, I think somewhere like around 2 million. And I thought to myself, like, oh, that's impressive. And he was very confident in himself, very proud of himself. But I looked and I said, okay, and let's just say in the event that the renters can't pay rent, or if an incident like COVID happens again, and the what you call it, renters moratorium, where you're obligated to pay rent, and you're the landlord who owns this building, who still has to pay mortgage, still has to pay property taxes, and this is in California, so it's very expensive here for property taxes. I said, how are you going to pay that? He's like, oh, and then he was stumped. Then I realized everything's good, and it's good until it's not. A lot of people who had properties, because, society says it's great to rent out properties and make profit, not all the time. There's a lot of backdraws to it. But that guy I was talking to, he mentioned, he's like, oh, you know what? He's like, that's, never really thought about that. I said, not a lot of people do until reality hits. And I don't even own property. I just invest in stocks because I don't have to pay property taxes on stocks. I don't have to deal with renters, giving me a hard time if I did own property. Now, is that something I want to do down the road? It's a possibility. I do have my real estate license. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying that I know the tip of the iceberg when it comes to real estate legality and regulations. There's just so much more to learn about real estate than what really meets the eye. Most of what I learned in the real estate license was just legality and regulations. The real work and the real knowledge comes from the hands-on when you actually work in real estate and you have to deal with purchase agreements and whatnot. But that's a whole different story. So going back to the Hive mentality, I want to give you guys a couple of ideas of, I would say, how to escape the Hive mentality. And when people look at you in a weird way and they question you why you're doing things a certain way, even though you might have a positive outcome for what you're doing, that's probably a good indication that you are not following that Hive mentality. And it shows that you're on a different trajectory, to hit that flower on the other side of the fence, like I mentioned before. Step one, I would say, is I highly recommend to invest more into the stock market. If you're an investor and you invest regularly, then invest more in the stock market. That's my recommendation. When they say 15 to 20%, try to up that number. Even if it's 22%, 23%, 25%, if you can hit 30, go for it. Now, my investment strategy is a lot more, not volatile, but a lot more aggressive because that's just the way I was raised. I started investing at 16 years old. So you can imagine like the amount of tolerance I have in the market. It's been built up over the years. And you can imagine like how I manage my finances, given market downturn. Right now we're in a down market, and the Hive mentality says, oh, don't invest in the market right now, it's down. My idea is, I'm going to personally invest into the market even more because right now it's a down market. A lot of things are on what we call sale. A lot of things are on a discount. So you lay that foundation now, and then in the future, the market rebounds and does what it does, you're going to be flying like at Mach 7. And I can't guarantee that, but there's a high probability of that happening. But you're not going to get there by investing 15 to 20% of your money. Now, I want to take a step back. When it comes to investing 15 to 20% of your money, if you're making $100,000 a year and you're able to invest 15 to 20% of your money, that's a considerable amount that you're investing even after taxes. Now, 15 to 20%, if you make $45,000 a year, that's really not a lot at all. That's barely anything. It's still something. Given a lot of time, it will compound, which is great. But I would say, I want to take a little step back and like kind of rephrase what I mentioned before. If you can up that amount that you're investing, it's great. 25, even 30%, even more than that. Like I do 50. But in the position that you're in, if you can't afford it, by all means, like disregard what I just said. But if you can afford it, especially if you're making a six-figure salary, you can literally invest that and fly high in the market. And I know as a fact because I have a lot of friends who have done that, especially during COVID, who found very good jobs and, I don't know, whatever careers they're in. And they've just been investing steadily, and with these great jobs. And, that's not including like their 401k and other personal investments, but just investing like 15-20% of their money. These people are flying. But if you're at a lower income, do try to, strategize. If you can't afford that, try like maybe 5%. That'd be my best recommendation. Try that out. And it's basically an experiment to see what works best for you. But don't succumb to the mentality of the honeybee. Like, oh, I have to go to this flower. I have to go to this flower. You're basically told what to do, and then you just go and do it. But in a sense, a lot of successful people that I've come to know are people who have really kind of defied what society deems as like necessary. One of the biggest ones that I really want to touch on, which a lot of people could really, really, really put in the back of their mind and remember every once in a now, is how much you work. I used to think that working longer hours, let's just say putting in more productivity during the week, was better. And then I realized I started to get slightly burnt out. Slightly is a little underrated. Um, if you're working 40 hours a week, but you're working very smart compared to the person who's working, 80, 90 hours a week, but they're just totally overworking themselves. Clearly, I'm not going to burn out as fast as the other person. And let's just say the argument is the other person working 90 hours a week is really good at what they do. They have strong stamina, but is it sustainable long term? Over one day, that's one thing. A week, month, year, 10 years. Can they do that for 10 years straight and maintain their, strong mentality and their positive emotions? A lot of times it takes a toll on people. It creates more stress. Stress can be good though. Bear that in mind. It can age you faster, especially when you let it get to you. So I've come to realize like, hey, working all these hours isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're working smarter, it can actually play out more beneficial for yourself in the end. And now, I was putting in productivity wise at one point somewhere around like 60, 65 hours a week. But then I realized, like, is this sustainable long term? I think so. I don't think 60, 65 hours a week is a tremendous amount. I have a buddy who he works over 100 hours a week, and he's starting to get burnt out. But I realize now, what if I can cut that 60, 65 hours a week down to maybe 50 or 55 hours? And if I could be productive at the same time and not have to worry about overworking myself, but at the same time, I'm putting in the work. At the same time, I'm putting in enough work to know that I'm getting enough benefit out of it, then to me, that is good. That's good enough for me. But that's something that you have to try on your own in order to understand where you stand, because a lot of people cannot work more than 40 hours a week. But do you want to know why? Because 40 hours a week is like the societal norm. It's that hive mentality that is the average work week. A lot of people I know who work, 10, 12 hours a day are extremely successful, which it kind of battles against my point of working smarter and less hours. But I do feel like in the beginning, you have to work more hours in order to just get ahead of everyone else. So in the span of 1 year, you might be 25, 40% farther ahead of everyone else because you're putting in that much more work and you're going to accrue that much more outcome, that much more benefit. And I did that, like, I'll be honest, I kind of killed myself, physically, mentally in the last year, 2022, because I wanted to get so much farther than a lot of other people. The issue with that is that I'm comparing myself to other people in society, comparing myself to that hive. It's not good to compare yourself with others. The only person you should be comparing yourself is with who you were yesterday. But going back to 2022, I thought to myself, if the average Hive, is working 40 hours a week, I need to put in 10, 15, 20 hours more per week. And I started seeing in the span of, it was literally few months, that I was getting so much more benefit and so much more, beneficial outcome than a lot of other people. I was seeing myself skyrocket. And it was amazing for me because I've never really put in a whole lot of work in life. I kind of, skated through high school, college, didn't really try too hard. And it wasn't until I realized once you get into the real world, it's all up to you. You're not in a class where you're being constantly compared to everybody else. The tests are the same, the reading material are all the same, and at the end of the day, there's 100% in the class you can get the highest or you fail. So you pass or you fail. In life, when you graduate, when you compare yourself to society, you could do whatever you want. You can go into business, psychology, engineering, do whatever you want. But if you're that guy in a job who's working 60, 70 hours a week and you're making X amount more, you're basically first in line to get a promotion. You're just so much happier because with more capital usually comes more opportunities and options in life and more stress. Then you're going to compare yourself to those, which you shouldn't, but those who are working 40 hours a week and saying like, oh, I, deserve my time off. And, I believe I work hard, so I'm going to go home and have a beer. But instead, you're going home, working out, reading, bettering your mind, physically and mentally, maybe even spiritually if you're into that. And then all these other people, they're just growing out of that 40 hours a week, but you're putting in 60, 70 hours a week. So in the span of 1 year, you have flown past these people because that is what it takes in order to be extremely successful. Anyone can be successful, but to be next level, extremely successful, the saying of investing, X amount into the market I think it was every month for like 40 years, compounding and whatnot, will give you $1.6 million. But they're basically, I forget where I read that, but that article I read, they mentioned that, the average person who does that for 40 years out of college or whatnot, by the time they're like 65, will have, I think it was something around $1.6 million. That is the average investor. I am not the average investor. I plan on hitting 1 million, and I'm talking about 1 million in actual liquid, not like, oh, I bought a home that's worth 800,000 added to all my other, net worth, and now I'm worth over 1 million. No, because the majority of that is a mortgage, and you don't own that house yet. It's basically just like on a line of credit at this point that you're still paying off. You might have only put down, I don't know, 50, 60,000, but I guess that's where people get the wrong perception that like, oh, I buy $1 million house, I'm a millionaire. The house is not actively printing you money. It might be appreciating over time in a good bull market, but for the most part, I want to see actual net. I want to see actual like positive liquid. Like when you look at a stock portfolio and it's green or it's money that you've invested, that is not a credit line. That is just straight liquid that you could liquidate, today if you wanted to, and you can invest that somewhere else. You could put down on a home. As someone who has like a stock trading, channel on YouTube, I talk about stocks, and a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't be talking about your finances, this and that. I said, who determined that? I said, well, it's just like not a good thing to talk about. Now, keep in mind, I don't talk about my net worth because net worth is a lot different from net income. Something else I want to touch on. In society, the Hive mentality, go figure, right? Believes that, everyone should be honest with like how much they're worth. So, but like, you don't want to make other people feel bad for how much you're making or how much you're worth. But I feel kind of weird talking about my net worth because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Net worth can mean, if I'm worth $100,000, for example, and my expenses are $10,000 a month, I'm only 10 months rich. That's why I look at it. My net worth is only 10 months. Then I'm dry, no more liquid. And a lot of people will say, oh, you shouldn't be investing into the stock market because I saw in the news this and that. Now, that goes back to the hive mentality of believing what the majority thinks, and now you can't think on your own. So, when I compiled a whole entire list of things that might derive from the hive mentality that might be, I wouldn't say toxic, but not essentially true from, uh, in a societal standpoint. One of the things is investing a specific percentage of your paycheck every single pay period, what 15 to 20%. And I said, boo, I disagree. I'm going to be different from the hive, and I'm going to invest 50%. When they say, oh, you should only be working 40 hours a week because, you should treat yourself at the end of the day, boo. I'm putting in 60 plus hours a week because I'm young and I have the opportunity to. So that's number two. You shouldn't work out too hard because, I don't know, it can create injury. Now, I don't disagree with that, but I say, boo, I work out just about every single day. And, mentally and physically, I read every single day a lot. Basically, reading is something society has really started to, not do nowadays. They say, oh, I'm too busy. So a lot of time of the day to get in reading. If I can read between 1 and 3 hours a day, I'm set. And that's usually my goal, and I've been doing it for the last year and a half, extremely just consistent about it. And these are all the things that I do to push against that hive mentality, hence going across the fence and touching that other flower. So I invest more than the hive would invest. I read more than the hive would suggest or recommend reading. I work out more than what the hive would recommend working out. I'm just strengthening myself. I work, job-wise and productivity-wise. I couldn't even do the math. I would say about 50% more than the average, I guess, if you were talking about just a 40-hour work week. So all these things considered, when you come back to all these things that I'm doing, there's a reason why when I talk to people at get-togethers or whatnot, and we're all in a similar age group, like, hey, what is everyone up to? What is society up to? That's my first thought when I enter these group conversations. A lot of people, I like to listen to them because I like to, see where they're coming from, where their frame of mind is coming from. And then I think to myself, like, wow, a lot of these people are not doing a whole lot. A lot of these people are just like really falling off, or they're just doing the bare minimum. And then I'm usually quiet in the beginning because I like to think to myself, like, hey, I'm going to listen to everyone here first. It's not about me. I want to listen to everyone else. And then when I start talking, a lot of people go, they really start to listen because I don't talk a whole lot. I don't talk just to listen to myself. I actually talk to actually give some sort of value or knowledge. And I don't like to lecture people, but I like to just throw what I can out there so people can take that and think to themselves like, hey, maybe this guy actually knows something that, is beneficial. So when I go off of that, a lot of people listen, hey, you want to network here? And I can't tell you how many get-togethers I've been at where people just start like slinging me business cards. I have like a little compartment on my desk where I have like maybe like 15, 20 business cards of like random people that I've met at parties, get-togethers, and they just like, hey man, like here's my business card, like I'd love to link up and like just maybe grab coffee. They just want to like pick your brain. And not to say I can't pick their brain because I don't consider myself the smartest in the room. But those are the people that I've come to realize. Those people give me their business cards, and I see at those get-togethers and those parties, they did not give almost any other business cards to anybody else. And I see like, oh, they're out there hunting to find value in people, but they're very careful of who they give their contact to. So when they gave me their business card, I realized at the end of the night, I get like sort of an idea of who this person is, where they came from, what they're about. Then I realized these people are more than likely the bees that build the cells in the hive, compared to the honeybees that go out there and collect all the pollen, whatever you want to call it. and I engage more with those people who are, in solitary, states, just doing their thing. And those are the people that, current day I've gotten to know fairly well. And these people are just, really good people in my corner that I'm always continuing to learn from, because they're not part of the main society group, the hive, the main hive. And they don't fall for that weak tendency of, the group decision making. They go on their own route. They go on their own little path to whatever flower they want to. I know it's a bad analogy, but I find it to just be the best one I can come up with at the moment. So, other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. This was something I really, really, really wanted to touch on, because I noticed this, especially since COVID started. A lot of people have had a strong tendency to fall for group decision making, and it's something that a lot of people could really break away from and come to realize that if I'm trying to think how to phrase this, if you break away from that group decision making and you go along your own path, I can almost guarantee you will come to discover that there's a lot more opportunity out there for yourself, instead of just hanging around a group all the time and letting everyone else talk, and you might subconsciously compare yourself to other people. But take that in mind, think about it, apply it, and I'm here to bet you that, if you apply it, you will most likely see benefit and a good outcome in the future. But it all starts from noticing the hive mind mentality. And if you're actually caught up in one, with chances are, if you're a part of an organization, you already are. You just have to look for the little things that, hints at what is the hive mentality, and what are you doing that could break away from, what the majority are doing on a regular basis, and what you have to do to set yourself aside from that group. And once you catch attention, then that means that you're on your path to, being that solitary bee. So, other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I hope you guys took some form of value from this, because this is something that I really enjoy talking about. And I hope that a lot of people could really just, take, more notice of. And I don't know, maybe it just helps to inspire one person out there. So, on that, I will talk to you guys next time. As always, take care.